Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's been a while. Kenny and I had to take a hiatus. Welcome back to SDRnomics. How are you today? Actually, I should say Stronomics.
Astronomics, it's back, baby. Woo! Turn it up. Tell your kids to shut up and pay attention for the next 15 to 20 minutes. It's going down. We're talking about there's not even a title up there. So I'm kidding. I know what we're talking about, but I'm excited to be back,
Cosmic
Bill.
season's over. Now what? What do we do? So before we jump in, Kenny, shorter format. We're shooting for 15 minutes, straight to the point, value packed. Pretty much, I had B&B camp. You were there in Montana. We were in the middle of Cossack season. I didn't plan on finding properties, but I had to do 21 finds. I think you said you did over 50 something, 55, 56. That's 75 properties that you and I helped people find. And I think a lot of them think you joked when I said, hey, Cossack season's over now. You're like, oh, you don't have to do anything. Well, you and I both know that is not the case. I think a lot of people think if we find somebody a property, it's just going to be a built-in super property and they can just, keep the furniture, put it on Airbnb, Verbo, and then hit the best scenario out of a good, better, and best performa. So, but you and I both know it doesn't work that way. So let's walk through some steps. We can just have open dialogue of really kind of, and not particular in the properties that we found, but just in general, what do people need to do? And if they bought for cost egg, number one is they need to qualify for material participation.
Yep. So the biggest thing, all right. So buying right is 50% of the job. The second half is operating it right. So, meaning you have to set it up, you have to do the value adds, and then you have to operate and have all the systems and stuff in place. I mean, so there's a lot of different pieces to break down there to talk about. But really, if we're talking about Cossack season now, what today is people are setting up their properties, meaning they're figuring out what their value adds are, and then they're trying to go to the next step, which is to launch and be successful and launch with speed. So for me, I like to start and focus on what's the value add with that property. Meaning, like, are you
I'm gonna interrupt you for a second because it
go
wouldn't
ahead?
be normal if I didn't fucking interrupt you.
No, no, of course not.
You said they're figuring that out. They should already fucking figure that out in their performa and budget because I think that's the biggest problem, right? People don't figure that out before they close, and closings are costing more these days. And people aren't harder for them to qualify. Sometimes the 20% goes to 25%. They don't know all that stuff on the front end before they close. And if they get that bomb, then they buy the 4-person hot tub versus the 6 to 7 person when it's a 12, sleeps 12 or 16 people, or they don't put in the coffee bar. They spring for, the indoor sauna, that's 3,500 versus the heavenly sauna, barrel sauna outdoors that doesn't have the same marketability, right? So I think that's one of the big things. And I know you do a really good job of this. I do a really good job of this when we're helping people find their next super property, or maybe it's not even a super property, but helping them budget that stuff because that should already be done. And I think that's the biggest mistake that people make is they don't really understand the bare minimum that it's going to take for that property once they close, right? To be able to achieve the performance numbers and they haven't budgeted accordingly. What do you see that too?
Oh, 100%. You have to go in with a game plan. I'll say, like, with the cost seg season, because you have to get bookings right away. If you're planning on doing like all these renovations and like it's just not going to happen, right? So you have to, like, you don't have a plan going into that property and like knowing what your value add is. It's just going to be I don't want to say a
A
cluster.
shit show. I'll say it.
Yeah,
It's going to be
yeah.
a shit
Well,
show.
I was going to say something a little more extreme, but yeah, there we go. Shit show's
Kenny,
fine.
last year, you may or may not remember, but we couldn't put we did 7 major renovations between this time and the end of the year. And I'll never forget Kim Fitzpatrick flew out to the Outer Banks on the 26th of December to start an install. Bria flew out on the 27th to start another install, 2 properties at the exact same time. I'm not going to go into details of how we made material participation, but a lot of people, you can do the reno, but you've got to get the bookings first. And I think the other thing people don't understand, Kenny, is they don't understand how cost eggs work. So if I buy a property and it's never been a short-term rental, then really you need to put that into service first, timestamp that, then start your rehab, right? Still get it done in the same year, because you get a bigger benefit. It's a couple of percentage points in most cases, but if that's $1 million property, that can be somewhat significant as opposed to it not being a commercial property, a short-term rental previously.
Yeah, I agree. I think I also think too, like, Uh, well, okay. I'm a little bit wary of like throwing out different strategies that I've heard from different CPAs because I'm not a CPA. So let me just disclaim the hell out of what I'm about to say. But
Did you see the Holiday Inn Select last night?
yeah, there we go. Yeah. So, well, so this is interesting. I was told by a CPA that you can, and I don't know how like gray this is. It sounded a little gray to me, but I thought they were like, "Oh, it's totally fine." You can do a renovation like add things that can be depreciated from a house. So a lot of your amenities, like updating a garage or adding a bedroom or putting in a pool, landscaping, a lot of those things can be depreciated. And so the guy said, "Look, you could buy a place, get your two rentals, shut it down, put in the pool, or we were talking about putting in a pool in this property, and you can actually depreciate that for that previous year." And I was like, "Really?" And he was like, "Yeah." So
So what you're talking about is I close December 8th. Kenny stays, Camera stays. I get my 2 stays. I qualify in that respect. I get my 100 hours in, and I'm the one that puts in the most time. And then in 2025, I go in and put in the pool, and then actually depreciate that off the 2024 purchase.
yes, yeah. So because you can do the cost segregation study in 2025 for the previous year. So the pool, what he was telling me is like they're not going to go when they go do the study, they're not going to go, "Hey, yeah, the pool was put in, in 2025." They're going to go, "There is a pool and this is the rate that it gets depreciated at." So I thought that was really, really fascinating. A
Here's
different
what I'm gonna.
strategy.
I would agree with that CPA. I wish we could literally. You should text Ryan Bakey and like give him the link and have him like literally jump in right now.
I know, right? We did
But
that.
this all comes down to execution,
It
right?
does. Yeah, it
Yeah, I
does.
mean, you can find great fucking properties. I can find great properties. Anybody else can. If they know how you do it, they know how I do it. They can find the property. If they know how I market, how I revenue manage, they can achieve my results. Same with you. So I'll go back to the closings last year, with what properties I'm talking about. And there was a Smith Lake property, and we closed on before the end of the year, but my contractor couldn't start until this year in 2024, right? So it's 2023 cost savings. So I think the big thing, if you're going to do that pool, you better pay for it in 2024. So we had a $600,000 budget total for renovations. We trimmed that back down to like 485. So we got a 2 containers on property at this property, and Bria did all the ordering for furniture, as much, not all of it, but as much as she could. I think she had like $150,000 budget to design the house. That probably 100 and I don't even remember 120, 130 of it was done and shipped and received in that container in 2023. Chad Nichols, our contractor down there, had roughly a $400,000 budget. I think we prepaid 350. I think it was actually exactly $350,000 in 2023 for services rendered. That, in my opinion, from everybody that I've spoken to, covers your bases. Doesn't matter if the work's done in the next year, but you better have the invoices and everything done in that previous year. I think you get into a shady area, and most people aren't going to be able to cash flow in that pool. They closed December 10th of this year. Bill and Kenny stay, then January they start putting in the pool, and they're going to make the payments like they would with anything else. I think you got to pay that up front, and that may warrant a short-term HELOC or something along those lines, or going to one of the a PML or whatever it is to get that done. But you got to understand what happens when you get audited, and there's always a payment trail for these things, right? So if you think you're going to close and then just pay for it in 2025 this year, I would be very skeptical about that. And I would consult somebody like a Ryan Bakey or somebody like that to really find out, what would happen. Like he just defended a successful audit, right, for the short term rental loophole about 2 months ago. Those things most likely come up. And I think that the other component is if your CPA has never defended, an audit, I don't know that that's really, at least that's not the CPA that I want. You know what I mean? So I think the execution's the critical part of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it's all about, we're doing a bunch of renovation work at the beginning of next year, not for a new property, but for a previous one. And we're trying to like we're making pretty much we're not paying for the whole job, but we're paying for most of it this year to help offset expenses for that particular property. So getting, and then also updating furnishings and things like that. We're already, even though we won't even be into that phase until like February, March, we're just going to start buying stuff in on Black Friday because we know we're going to do it, and we can save by getting better deals, and we can spend that money that we want to, expense out for the taxes and everything. And so, yeah, I mean,
That is a big tax hack that people really don't understand, Kenny, is if you're a lot of us have downtime in January and February, and that's when we do our renovations. That's where we do our upgrades. I mean, if you have a good year revenue this year and you're gonna say you're gonna have do $150,000 in revenue and you're gonna net 50 or 60,000, you should buy that and expense that in this year to offset. So, like if Kenny, if you take on, you can't do this through STR Insights, but if somebody comes to you, around Christmas and says, "Hey, I want to hire you to, find me three properties," and it's whatever, 8,000, $10,000 a pop, and Kenny's like, "Man, I don't want that revenue right now. Just hey, we'll sign the contract. We'll start working. Give me $1,000 deposit, but pay that 25 or $30,000 balance on January 1st. Here's the invoice, right? So you can defer revenue, but you can also, take the expenses this year, and you could have a pretty good delta, in offsetting that. And I think people don't. Not to turn this into a Ryan Bakey episode, but those are the things that once you close, you need to start thinking about how you're going to really maximize your property, right? And those are things I think you hear it the same that I do. People, oh, here's my ADR, here's my gross revenue. Show me the fucking bottom line. Show me your P&L. How much did you actually net post tax, right? Post tax at the end of the year. And I think people just think about their overall investment portfolio is a tax strategy, and they don't really break it down, like you just said, property by property.
yeah, there's a lot of like little tricks and things like that. And it's why it's really important to follow someone like a Ryan Bakey and be in that and learn all those different things because it can save you a lot of money. Especially if you're already planning on like, doing changes or making upgrades to your property. I learned, I think I told you this. I don't know where I heard this from. Maybe this, I don't remember, but like the average hotel does like some sort of refresh to their furnishings and maybe their like front foyer area or whatever every 5 years. And they do a major renovation about every 13 to 15 years. And so for some of us who've been doing this for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, like some of our properties, there needs to be updates. Like some of those beds, let's be honest, like some of those beds are getting a little lumpy. You know what I mean? Like some of the pillows are getting flat. Like we need to really be like going in and getting,
What are you
getting like,
insinuating, Kenny?
yeah. Well, I was here's something really funny. My one property, my oldest property as a short-term rental, I just got rid of. It had a one-bedroom unit. And I looked and I had over 1,000 people stay there through the
The
course of
Buffalo duplex?
the duplex. Yep, the Buffalo duplex. It is gone. Rip.
That's not
So
really your first investment, though.
no, no, no. Yeah, I know, right?
There's no beds at that first investment.
Yeah, well, I mean, no. There's like a cactus you can sleep under, I guess. I was kind of like I was thinking about that one. I was like over 1,000 people stayed there in like the span of like 6 years. And I'm like, I don't want to think and it's the same bed and it's the same like I was like, I don't want to like I'm like, it's gone. Like it's getting burned. It's like what has happened in that place with 1,000 different people? No idea. So anyway, it's good to refresh and it's good to be smart about it and think long term. Like you need to be thinking long term anyway. It's a business. How can you stay on top? What strategies, what things you can add, and so on. But that also includes the refreshes, timely refreshes. Like we're planning on doing it in March, but I know I'm going to do it. So I'm going to order the crap now because I can save on it now and also offset some of the income from this year.
I mean,
So
speaking of refreshes, that ties into markets I know that you and I look at, specifically kind of on the East Coast, the Outer Banks, Maine, all the Rhode Island, all these places that have the older properties that have not been refreshed ever, ever. Like those two Outer Banks properties, we picked up last year. They none of it, neither of them had been refreshed ever. I remember Bree and I sat on the couch on one of them. We're like, dust just kind of poofed up, and we're like, my God, this has probably been here since day one in the 70s. And I think that one of the things that becomes really important, especially if you have a new purchase right now, and with any of your properties, you probably should be doing light refreshes, in my opinion, every off season. Like those lumpy pillows that Kenny said. I mean, they only cost $20 at freaking Home Goods. We replace our pillows at every property at least annually. But, I do that 48 inches and down. And I'll give you an example. At Smith Lake property, literally, we had two stays there before I had the mastermind meeting there in August, Kenny. And then within two more stays, we essentially had to do the entire house 48 inches and down because we average like 27 people staying there per day. And the higher the volume of traffic, the higher volume of people, you need to keep that up. One thing that I've learned, and this starts right after a new purchase, is if you defer like paint and stuff, just small stuff like that, and it gets 6 months in, 9 months in, and then you're like, oh, well, we don't need to do anything. Those paint scuffs have been there for two or three. We'll just get through, busy season in the summer and then we'll do something. Then you got to paint the whole fucking thing. And you also can't position it, market it, and price it as a new property. Because one of the things that people have done, like Emil and I have been talking about this forever, is using the word new in your listing. Once you purchase, once you've updated it, once you've designed, I have one property that I've owned for 3 years and I still have the word new in it. And it's because we update it, every 2 weeks. And that's Dragonfly. Every other property, we don't treat it the exact same way. So I think that refresh stuff becomes critically important.
Yep. Yep. I agree. I agree. I love that. Yeah. So, you know, you've got your new property. I think for kind of wrap this episode up here and summarize it all like bullet points. Like you got your new property, you're going to do your cost seg. So we talked about launching and getting things ready. But for those of you who you might have already had a property, I think most of the people listening might already have a property. Think about the refresh in the next year. Think about ways to offset taxes in the coming year for those current properties. There's a lot of things that you can be doing. You need to be thinking long term, not just short term in the next 6 months. Yes, thinking about off season and getting those bookings is important, but think long term. Think, how am I going to offset these taxes? How am I going to get and think new, so I can keep marketing, keep my ADRs high.
Follow Ryan Bakey at Learn Like a CPA. Has a tremendous amount of great tax strategies on Instagram. Join his free Facebook group. I'll tell you, it's once you buy the property, it's about how much you get to keep. It's not about how much you make out of that property. Increase your profit margin. Take advantage of the tax code, as Kenny says. Most importantly, if you found any value here, smash that subscribe button and make sure you come back and see Kenny and I next week.